Philosophical Mysticism Simplified, Reason's Curse. All right, so Reason's Curse. Well, philosophers tend to worship reason. And it's just something that philosophers tend to do, almost in a way comparable to how other people might worship, like religion. So philosophers tend to worship reason, but we may question whether we should. So why should we worship reason or hold reason in such high esteem? And I'm going to say, while useful and even beautiful, reason carries a curse. And I'm using reason here like with a capital R, when people talk about reason like in this sort of elevated sense. And philosophers have done this for a long time without really explaining why. But the real reason why is, reason is just such an important thing. Well, I'm going to argue that reason carries a curse. And this curse is especially problematic for philosophers whose whole occupation is tied to the use of reason. So in terms of reason's curse, those most susceptible are philosophers. Though, non-philosophers, everybody is susceptible to reason's curse in general. So something that everybody should sort of be aware of and be mindful of. But if you're a philosopher, you're really, really, really susceptible, more so than most people. Well, as far as reason's curse goes, there's a lesser curse, a greater curse, and a severe version of it. So lesser version, a greater version, and a severe version of reason's curse. And I'm going to talk about each of these variants. But just like in general, like sort of a basic summing it up real quick, what I'm going to talk about, the lesser curse holds that we must listen to reason, and reason is always right. That's the lesser version. The greater version of reason's curse, we are reason, and our very existence is wrapped up in reason. And 3, the severe version, pretty much simultaneously accepting both 1 and 2. And if you accept both 1 and 2, you're going to be very crippled, both in your agency and your ontological esteem. So you could accept 1 without 2, or you could accept 2 without 1. It's perfectly possible to do. And philosophers have done this, either accept just 1 or just 2. But if you accept both at the same time, you're going to be severely crippled in terms of your agency and ontological esteem. You become like paralyzed, or at least you become, it's a very bad situation to be in, and that's going to be the severe version of reason's curse. And I'm going to talk about that as well. All right, so the first version, the lesser curse. So should you listen to reason? It's a fair question. Well, in most cases, it does pay to do so, because for whatever reason tends to get it right. Reason tends to get it right for whatever the case may be. Why? It just tends to sort of to be useful for us to have. But that being said, besides having a good track record, there are no normative reasons to follow reason's commands. So reason is useful. You can't deny that. But besides it's just sort of getting it right most of the time, or almost all the time, there's really not a normative reason here. And mainly because reason lacks emotion. So it will remain indifferent as far as what actions you choose. It makes no difference to reason whether you choose great benevolence or horrible malice. Reason really doesn't care. And that's problematic. At some point, at the very start of philosophy even, morality became wed to reason. And not long after, reason became a very controlling husband, even an abusive husband. Morality was not even allowed to follow its most sincere feelings and instincts without first getting reason's approval. And an evaluative transition happened where should listen to reason changed to must follow reason. So it's like this sort of like suggestion here, practical suggestion, change into a moral command when this sort of merging happened between reason and morality. So you went from like a suggestion, a sort of practical, useful suggestion, to an actual command that you must follow reason. And this happened at some point. But again, we have to ask, should we always listen to reason? And here I'm going to give a firm no. You shouldn't always listen to reason. If we always listen to reason, no matter what, we become slaves to it. And this is a problem even for the best of us, like Socrates, who are quite happy being reason's slave. Reason's slave. He's perfectly fine with it. But that's not good. That's a problem. And I'm not using the word slave in a figurative way. To always follow reason's commands, even when you don't sincerely want to, limits your freedom. Your will is not your own, and you don't have a choice. So if you really elevate reason to this sort of status, like Socrates does, where you must follow its commands, you're not free. You don't have a free will. You don't have a choice. You can't make a choice that's your own. And that's a big problem. That's what the lesser curse is. Because at least some of the time, you should be able to act irrationally if you want to. At least some of the times, you should be able to sort of follow your instincts, your intuitions about what you should do. But reason doesn't allow you to do so, and that's a big problem. So that's going to be the lesser curse. The greater curse. So Descartes in 1641 uttered the famous line, "I think, therefore I am." Cogito ergo sum. In the philosophical tradition has been inflicted ever since Descartes. But this sort of greater version of reason's curse has some serious implications if we take it seriously. Descartes was so convinced that he was willing to deny the entire external world outside of reason. So he was so convinced, so inflicted by the greater curse, that he's willing to deny the entire external world, everything outside of reason. Descartes' evil demon, his famous evil demon, was in fact himself. Of course, Descartes saved himself from absurdity by resurrecting God from the ashes in order to make the world livable again, so he's going to bring in God. But putting God aside, so obviously we shouldn't allow Descartes to make that move, if you want to be genuine here. But even putting God aside, the sanctification of reason, though we don't usually think of it in this way, is a scary prospect. So the greater reason's curse here is a scary prospect. In the lesser curse, we're not allowed to make decisions counter to reason. In the greater curse, we're not even allowed to exist without reason. So the lesser curse, we're not able to make decisions outside of reason. In the greater curse, we're not even allowed to exist at all without reason. Our whole existence is wrapped up in reason. We're not even allowed to exist outside of reason. Luckily, most people don't take the implications of Descartes seriously. And this extreme skepticism can be forgiven on account of the fact that no one actually acts on it. At least not enough in a way to seriously adjust their lives. Like jumping off a cliff, hoping you could fly. So even an extreme skeptic that thinks the external world might not exist or doesn't exist, they're still not going to take it as far as jumping off a cliff, right? They're going to have some reservation here. But Descartes, the greater curse that Descartes has, is going to sort of push us in this direction, where our existence itself is part of reason, and that's problematic. So we can't forgive the skeptics, but what can't be forgiven, though, is denying the existence of the body in the extreme position. That's what Descartes going to do, an extreme position. Or treating it as real, but a mere automaton in Descartes' graceful compromise. So, of course, throughout the rest of the meditations, he tries to find this compromise to sort of include the body and so on, is graceful compromise. But it's still a big problem, because in the compromise Descartes gives, the body exists, but the body's a mere automaton. It's insignificant. It really doesn't matter very much. So even in his compromise, he's gonna acknowledge that the body might exist outside the mind or outside of reason, but it's insignificant. It really doesn't matter, and that's problematic in terms of what the greater curse entails. All right, the severe curse. The final version of Reason's curse, combining both 1 and 2, comes a little later in its clearest form from Immanuel Kant. And mainly for Kant, reason, morality is inescapable. You do something seriously wrong by acting against its commands. That's pretty much the first part, right? And he goes on to further say, all we are sinners of rationality. And our entire worth is wrapped up in being such. This is what Kant holds. And you can see this is clearly just pretty much both 1 and 2 taken together, taken as a sort of, a package together. If that wasn't clear enough, Kant clarifies that emotions and desires and whatever other inclinations we might have should play no decisive role in our moral decisions. In some places, he extends this to all of us, every decision we make. So our inclinations or desires or emotions, anything that's outside of reason, for Kant doesn't matter. It's insignificant. So that's a big deal. That's a problem. And again, you can see this combination of 1 and 2. Kant should have just gone further and deny the body altogether. Just deny everything outside of reason altogether. You might as well. Descartes does it. You might as well do it as well. If your inclinations don't matter, your desires don't matter, your emotions don't matter, your sort of random thoughts don't matter, your attachments don't matter, all that matters is rationality. Well, why not just deny the entire body if you're going to do that? Deny everything physical about you. I mean, you might as well just go on and make that move. And as much as Kant talks about freedom, we're clearly not free under his theory. Because we must do what reason dictates. We have to. We're obligated. We're commanded to do what reason dictates. No exceptions, no matter what. And failing to do so not only is a practical failure, but a betrayal of our very nature. So notice this move here. So in the sort of lesser curse, if you kind of don't do what reason commands, you sort of act irrationally, you act immorally, and you kind of fail in that regard. But in the severe curse, if you actually act against reason, you decide something against reason, you betray your whole existence. Your very existence is betrayed. You betray your entire being by acting against reason. It's a failure of your very nature when you combine 1 and 2 here, where your decisions are actually going to have an impact or be the same as your actual existence itself, or your nature itself. And we can see here, of course, this is a very severe position to take. And we shouldn't make this move. We were not required to make this move. Because if we do, we're crippled. Like we're crippled as a person, as an individual. Your agency is crippled, and your ontological esteem is crippled as well. You're not allowed to be a person outside of reason. You're not allowed to be an individual outside of reason. You're not allowed to make decisions outside of reason. And that pretty much, freezes you. It makes you sort of like, it paralyzes you where you're not really even a person anymore. You're just sort of a slave of reason. So that's a severe curse. Not irrationalism. So really important here in terms of this, in philosophical mysticism, in this video, it's not irrationalism that I'm endorsing. I'm just saying or arguing that you're not required to always follow reason no matter what. You're allowed to make decisions, even if maybe it's a good idea to follow reason in most cases, because like I said, he does get it right. You should be allowed to act against reason. It should be a live option for you to act against reason's commands. Sometimes, you should be allowed to act irrationally. You should be allowed to contradict yourself, to be inconsistent. You should be allowed, for instance, if you want to be an artist, rather than like the more rational decision to be a doctor or something like that. You should be allowed to follow your whims, irrational or otherwise. This should be a live option. When you remove this option, that's problematic. But that's not saying that reason is bad. It's actually quite useful, but you should at least have an option to go against it if you want to. If you sincerely want to, if it's really important to you, you sincerely want to, you should be able to act counter to reason. And reason, really to be clear, reason is part of the mind. And the mind is an important part of the human organism. We wouldn't be human without having a mind or without having reason. In fact, reason is probably the best part of us and a very special thing. But just as we sometimes fail to see the vices in those we love, we also will often ignore vices of reason when they occur. If we sort of worship reason, we're going to ignore its vices. And reason is not perfect. It's important to be clear. Reason is not perfect. We shouldn't treat it as such. And also, sort of countering the second version of reason's curse, the greater version of reason's curse. We should also be clear that reason is not all we are. Who we are, what we are, existence is not entirely wrapped up with reason. Reason is not who we are. Reason is not all we are. We are a composite organism made up of a body and emotions and a mind. And it's best if we treat them all as special and afford them the worth they deserve. So you're not just reason. You're an organism. You're a composite organism. You have emotions. You have a body. You have a mind. You have inclinations. You have desires. All these things matter. And all these things you should sort of give a certain weight in addition to reason. And this is really important. So it's not irrationalism. I mean, reason, you should, it's a good idea to listen to reason. It tends to get it right, tends to be useful, tends to even be beautiful. We see something rationally carried out. It's a beautiful thing to witness. But you should be able, at least in some cases, to act counter to reason. To reasons, if it really matters to you, you should be able to act counter to reason's commands. And also, again, reason is not all you are. You exist as a composite organism, as a human being, independent of reason. You're not simply reason. That's not entirely what your makeup is. And we shouldn't treat a human being as if that's the case. So not irrationalism, more of like trying to sort of find the proper place for reason. It shouldn't be an object of worship, but it is important, and that's something we should sort of acknowledge. But also at the same time, we should also acknowledge the body, our emotions, our desires, our inclinations. These things are also important as well. All right, that's the video.